let's go ahead and let's start talking about what we came here for today. Okay, Lokring. You cannot get certified in this class. For you to get certified, you have to take a test, and you also have to do hands-on showing that you actually know how to perform correctly the Lokring system. I actually had a couple of ones for where I had my training. I'm looking for them. Here they are right here. Okay. So if you look right here, whenever I did my training, here's aluminum to aluminum. I will tell you that this right here is the most difficult one for you to do. You've got the only other one that's really hard to do. I'm trying to find my little piece. That's a reduced. There it is. Okay, we've got one that is a reduced. Okay, you can tell this that this is it's reduced from a 1/4 inch to about a 1/16. Those are all measured in millimeters, and I don't have my caliper with me, so I don't have that information with me. But this is also a little more difficult. The hardest one for me, whenever I went and did it, was this little beauty right here. Okay, I'm going from a copper line to an aluminum tube. So from copper to aluminum is a little bit more difficult. Of course, this is what goes right here in the end of the I almost poked a hole in it. Goes into the end right here for your capillary tube. Okay, that goes into the dryer. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's get started. Okay, we're not going to go through these. So Lokring, the advantages of the Lokring connection. Okay, as I tell everybody, this unit right here, it's not a matter if I'm looking at the, excuse me for just a second. I don't know who in the world this is. Okay. It's a technician that I had left on, that I had to leave and answered his answer. I had to give him an answer on a text message. So we definitely want to talk about the advantages of the Lokring system. Okay. One of the things that we definitely want to talk about is that 40 to 50% of the time you can save. Once you become proficient at this unit, I can save 40 to 50% of my time. Okay. It's a simpler connection. There's no brazing required. It's a cleaner unit. Okay. There's no nitrogen that you have to have, no heavy equipment, this is not true. You do have to have fire protection. I will tell you right now that you will need to have some fire protection just in case. Okay, we're going to go through this in just a minute. Okay, then repair in a customer's home, I can do that without having to remove the unit. Okay, no fire license is necessary, and there's OEM is approved, and then of course the other one is more cost effective. Once you have made the initial purchase, it is just as cost effective or more than me having to buy my bracing rods, my flux. You still have to have your sandpaper. And of course, on this one, you actually also have to have my fittings, and I have to have my lock ring, my my Lokring tools, and we're going to get through all of that, and we're going to show you everything that you need right here in this unit. Okay. So, like I said, for all common refrigerants, okay, Lokring connectors are for type 00, are for copper or aluminum, and also they can be used with steel. Okay, so it's copper and aluminum and steel. Can be used for all standard refrigerants or mixtures of HFC, HFO, and HC. It is not suitable to do an ammonia unit or a CO2 unit. So I can do on anything, I can use it on anything but an ammonia or a CO2 unit. Okay, it's not rated for that. Okay, I can do it on 134A. I can do it on, there's still some R22 out there. There's almost anything out there I can use it on. Okay, so this is the functional principle of the Lokring connection. That's the next step that we're going to go to. But I have a question right now. Does anybody have any questions concerning what we can use it on? We're gonna dive in to how we actually use it. So go ahead and tell me right now if you have any questions. Okay. I'm going to wait just a second here. I'm going to take a drink of water. I'm going to make one quick thing. Give me just 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. I had to turn the fan on. It's about 80 degrees in here, so it's a little toasty for me. But let's go ahead and get started, and let's talk about the functional principle of the Lokring connection. Okay, so as I am installing this Lokring connection, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to find my problem that I have. So if I'm replacing a compressor, we know what we got to do. If we have a unit that we have a leak from, maybe it's a bad solder joint, I can just take and clean that whole area. Okay. Then I can use my cutter and cut that whole area. Then I take and I'm getting ready to put this Lokring together. Okay. So what is the Lokring connection made of? Okay. The one part is the body. Okay. The other, if you look to the right of that, that is the body. Then the second part of that is we have two connectors. Okay. As you saw, one of the ones that I had was a copper on one side and aluminum on the other. Okay. So I can do that and use that. The other thing that I've got to have is I have to have a lock prep. Okay. This is one side of the bottle. On the other side of that bottle, it has a date written on it. I have got to make sure that that date is within the last year. Okay. If it's, let's say that my date says June of 2025, and it's now July of 2025. Do I use that right now? No. If it is 1 year from the date that is stamped on the bottle, I cannot use that. If I do, I may have an issue that will cause a leak. Okay, so the Lokring connector is made up of a body and two rings. That's what we've already said. During the assembly, lock prep is added to the end tubes, and then those tubes are inserted into the body to the inner stop. So where is in the inner stop? if you look right there where it says A, that's the insertion area. I want to push those tubes until they stop. Okay. It's very important that I get that cinched all the way in. Okay. Once I have done that and I have hit that center stop, I now am going to rotate that connection. Once I rotate that connection, it says to do it 320 degrees. I do it twice. So I make one full turn, then turn and do it a second time. So I do two 360. So that's 720 degrees. Okay. So once the connection is closed, the tube ends and the connector body will all be hermetically sealed and will not leak. You guys are going to have to pardon me. The bottom, my bottom lip is numb, so I had problems with one of my teeth, and I had to go to the dentist office, so I'm a little bit numb. So I apologize about that. Okay. The Vulcan Lokring, this is our working pressure, 360 PSI. My temperature range, it can go from 58 degrees to 302 degrees. Okay. I can go either a 1.6 diameter, which is a capillary tube. Most capillary tubes are either 1.6, 1.8, or 2.0. Okay. Up to a 10.5 millimeter, which is 3/8 of an inch. Okay. Approved refrigerants. It's suitable for all HCs, which is hydrocarbon, hydrofluorocarbon, which is HFC, and all the mixtures. The only two that you can't do this on is ammonia or CO2. I personally have not ever had to work on a CO2 unit. The only thing I ever had on the CO2 unit was I had to change the line on a CO2 unit. Okay, so the antibiotic sealant, that's what we're going to go through next. Okay, metal tubes can have a longitudinal grooves on the surface from production. These grooves can be filled easily by cleaning the tubing with Scotch-Brite pads, or you can use just some regular old. Golly, I just lost my train of thought. You can either use a Scotch-Brite pad, or I can use a piece of sandpaper. Okay, so after you do that, I'm going to have to put some hermetically sealed on it, which is the Lokring 65G. Okay. Not only will you have some grooves that are running north and south, you also are going to have some that are going east and west, because whenever I'm applying whenever I'm cleaning my unit, that is going to also leave some scratches. So I want to make sure that I get all of those sealed, and I have to use my lock prep on it. Okay. Like I said, it's an anabolic sealant. Okay. It's not an adhesive. It hardens under the absence of oxygen while it's in contact with the metal ions. After curing, its elasticity structure is permanent, retained in a temperature range of minus 58 degrees up to 302 degrees. Since lock prep does not contain solvents, it has to evaporate during the hardening. The finished connection is ready for use shortly after assembly. So let me tell you about the what happens. So here's a picture of it right here. So lock prep compensates for any unevenness in the tube surface. Lock prep will flow into these areas in the microscopic cavities and fill the voids completely. After curing, lock prep takes on a semi-solid state. If you look right there, there are pictures of where the lock prep has filled in those gaps. Okay, so lock prep, the dosing guide, this is the most important thing that you need to make sure of. Okay, I've yet to figure out how I can get a 0.5 drop. I mean, you're either getting a small drop or a drop. 0.5 must be the small drop. Okay, so if I have a capillary tube somewhere between a 1.6 to a 3.2 millimeter, I'm going to use that half of a drop to a drop. If I have a tube which is a 3.5 to 5 millimeter, I am going to use a 1 to 1.5 drops. Okay. If I have a 6 to an 8 millimeter, which is most of my tubing that I'm going to find in it, I'm going to go between 2 to 2.5 drops. If I have a large 3/8 9 to 11 millimeter tube, I'm going to go between 3 to 3.5 drops. Okay, this right here, I inserted this slide because it's very important for you to know. The connection must be closed within 20 seconds of applying lock prep. Okay, minimum 10 minutes to let the unit set, not to mess with it. You don't pull a vacuum. You don't do anything with it. You don't even apply radial torque to it. Okay. If I do anything that would mess any of this up, I'm gonna have a leak. Okay. My curing time increases when the temperature decreases. Okay. If you look right here, it's at 10, which is 50 degrees Fahrenheit. It's going to take me somewhere around 38 minutes for it to set up. Now, if it's 40 degrees outside, I've got a little bit more of a problem. This is the curing time in minutes. So that's 40 minutes for that lock prep at 40 at somewhere around between 32 and 50. Usually I say it's about 40 degrees. That's going to take 40 minutes. Okay. As my temperature increases, so if I'm at 86 degrees, my curing time is just under 10 minutes. So I tell everybody 10 minutes. Okay. Temperatures above 302 degrees Fahrenheit may burn out the lock prep and thus cause leaks. Okay. I doubt you're going to be doing a 302 degree fill. So, all right. So excessive heat. Temperatures above 150 degrees, 302 degrees Fahrenheit may burn out the lock prep and cause leaks. Okay. Keep this in mind. If you braze near a lock ring, a single lock ring or a double O connector, I've got to put something down so that it will not damage the fitting itself and the lock prep. Number one, I should never, ever, beyond any other reasonable doubt, ever use a torch on R600. I told you that one of the things that I said is not true, that I always take fire protection with me. Okay. I have it's the normal side that sits in my truck. So I take the one out of my truck whenever I go inside the house. I have to make sure that it's charged and that I'm not going to pull the pin and push on it, and it not stop the fire. Because if I have R600, which is a butane type formula, okay, it will ignite just like a lighter. If I go and spray butane to an open flame, I am going to have a problem. Okay, I have seen pictures of technicians that have damaged their hands. I had one guy that actually blew, and it burnt his hair and it burnt his eyebrows. Thank goodness he's not like me and didn't have any beard or goatee or even a mustache. It did his lips. It did burn his lips, but at least it wasn't like his facial hair didn't melt to his skin. We've got to be very careful with these. Please, always, it's always better to be safe. Okay. So here we go. Let's talk about the right here. You look right here, it says 12 of 24. So this unit, if I pull my unit out and I look at it and I see 12 of 24, that unit's not any good. It's expired. I have to take and throw that away and get a new tube of Lock Prep 65G. There are different formulas for Lock Prep, okay? The 65G is for double O fittings, okay? So you've got to make sure that you're using the right Lock Prep for the right system, okay? Safety. Our MSDS sheet right here, okay? Material Safety Data sheet for Lock Prep. It's nitrite glove or Victon gloves. You need to be wearing those. It will go into your skin and it can cause you headaches, and there's some other issues that occur with it. I don't want to ever use cotton or absorbent gloves because that just sucks the Lock Prep in, and I really have problems, okay? I'm going to store in a closed original container at temperatures somewhere between 41 degrees and 77 degrees. We all know that if it rides around in my truck and I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, when have you ever seen somebody's truck at 77 degrees? Okay, not very often. Even in the dead of winter, I'm still gonna have issues with that. So I got to be very careful. Okay, so the rules: respect the material safety data sheet of the Lock Prep. It will keep you safe. The assembly process. This is my favorite part. If you can't tell, I really, really like the Lokring system. Okay. As I said, Lokring components for our refrigeration units are 00. Okay. What does this include? Almost like an under-counter ice maker, a refrigerator, a beer stein that you have that rolls around on four wheels. It could be an actual cooler that you could work on with the 00. Once again, it's anything between the point 0.5 up to the millimeters. Here's the 00 connector. We're going to go down here and we're going to look at it. Okay. So proper sizing, permanent, secure, and if you do it right, it's leak free. So it can go between a 1.6 millimeter and a 10.5 OD. Okay. I have always got to please use make sure that I'm putting the right size. So my materials, it's either going to be brass with either steel or brass rings. Okay. My aluminum will come with aluminum rings. Okay. So Cu is copper. So if I'm going between copper to copper, I'm going to use the brass connector. If I'm going between aluminum and aluminum, I'm going to use the aluminum connector. If I'm going to go between copper and steel, I'm going to use that brass connector. If I'm going to go between the copper and the aluminum, I'm going to use the aluminum connector. If I go between steel and steel, I'm going to use that brass connector. So what it tells you is if you have aluminum on anything, I am going to use an aluminum connector. On the others, I want to use the brass connector. Okay. So the Vulcan part number. How do I break down the part number to know which size that I want? So if I've got a straight brass and it has a 8 NKMS00, that's the part number. The real part number is L130000592. So the first thing is the 8. What is that? That's my tube size. Okay. My NK tells me that that's a straight connector. My MS is the material that it is. And then the connector type is 00. If I have a straight aluminum connector, once again, I have an 8 NK AL00. Okay. So my tubing size on this one is an 8. Okay. That's the 8. That's the tube size. It's an NK. It's a straight connector. Then AL tells me that that is my aluminum connector. It's the material that it's made out of. And then 00 is a connector type. And that connector, that connector type is for all refrigeration. Okay. The part number on that one is an L130000506. Okay. So let's go back here. We've got a brass reducing connector. Okay. So that tells me my tube size is I'm going from an 8 to a 2. That's 8/2. That's my tube size. My NR tells me that that is a reducing connector. My material, once again, is MS. That tells me that I'm going between a brass and a copper. Okay. And then my connector type, of course, is a 00. And my part number there is a L130000651. Okay. Then I have an aluminum reducing connector. So my tubing size, I'm going between an 8 and a 2. Okay. So if you look at the tubing size, which is this one right here, it's between an 8 and a 2. Okay. So I want to make sure that I'm using the reducing connector. The material is aluminum. And then, of course, my connector type is 00. And that part number is L130005650. Okay. So let's talk about how I'm going to measure this. I'm going to always use a digital caliper. Okay. I always am going to use my digital caliper. I'm either going to use it on the inside of the tubing or I'm going to use it on the outside of the tubing. Okay. If I'm measuring the outside of the tubing, I've got 2 spots that I'm going to check. Okay. I'm going to go just in the middle of the caliper itself. Okay. And I'm going to measure the millimeters of it. Okay. If I'm using a regular piece of tubing, Okay, I'm going to measure it right in the center. If I am measuring the capillary tube, I am going to move right at the very end right there of the two pieces, and that will give me my measurement for my capillary tube. But what we need to do is the first thing to be able to measure it, the first thing I need to do is I need to punch the on off button. I need to press that. Once I do that, I'm going to see what it says. If I get 0, 0, I'm fine. If I come up with 0.01, I need to zero it out. So what do? I mash that button on the right there to the right of my on off switch, and that will in turn show me that it has gone back to a 0, 0. Then I'm going to look at the top and make sure that I'm going to my toggle unit is millimeters. Okay. Then I have a locking knob. So if I go and I measure it, I want to lock it into place. I can just spin that knob and it'll tighten it. Now, for me to go and check it, I can use this thumb wheel to adjust the size. All right. So the buttons may take longer. Those vary by model. The one that comes in your kit is very similar to this one. And this is the only one that I've ever used. And it was a great tool. Okay. So once again, inside jaws, measure the inside diameter. If you know what inside diameter is, if you talk to a plumber, that is ID is inner diameter. OD is outer diameter. Okay. So my inside jaws measure my inner diameter. Okay. My outer jaws measure my outside diameter. Notice that is in the center of that. I do not want to put it right back at where the on-off button is. That's too far. It needs to be right there in the center to measure it. Okay. Once we get down to measuring they didn't show it. Okay. So the next one should be the capillary tube. You notice that there's two little pieces right here on the very bottom, and that shows that's where I measure my capillary tube. Okay. So my connector section, how do I measure? I'm going to clean my jaws. I'm going to fully close the slider and zero it. If you notice right here, this one says 0.05. That's not a good thing. So I need to go back and zero that out. And that gets me to this 0.00 that we already talked about. So then I'm going to set it to the millimeter section, which is up there at the very top. And then my caliper is ready to use. Okay. So once again, it shows right there. I do not calibrate in that tube area where I was talking about, right up next to where it shows. I want to put it in the center of those jaws, in between a 3.5 and an 11 millimeter tube. My capillary tube, that shows right there exactly where it needs to go, and that's between a 1.6 and a 3.2 millimeter. That's how I'm going to measure that. Okay. So tube measurements. Once again, my capillary tube, like I said, 1.6, 1.8, 2, 2.2, 2.5, 3.0, 3.2. The most popular is between a 1.8, a 2.0, and a 2.2. That's the main ones that are the 1.8 and the 2.0 are the most popular in the U.S. But once again, we've got a lot of manufacturers that are not from the U.S., and most of those are 1.8 to 2.2. Okay, so the fit, it doesn't fit check. So I'm going to make sure that I have my capillary tube. This is the 2.0. It's the most popular. And then my tolerance is plus or minus 0.1 millimeters. So if if you're going to go and learn this and you sit in the class, you want to make sure that you remember what the tolerance levels are. Okay. A capillary tube, that is, the tolerance is plus or minus 0.1 millimeter. So if I've got tubes 3.5 to 10.5 millimeter, those are at 5 millimeter increments. Okay. My tolerance is 0.2 millimeters. Okay. Once again, let's say I have a 10.5. Okay. But I don't, whenever I go and measure it, I don't get a 10.5. I get a 10.7. Would that go in between the 8? Would that fit in the 8 millimeter tubing? Yes, that's at the very top of it. If I have a 10.2, would that work? Yes, that will work. You've got to know these whenever you go to take your test. Okay. Tolerance acceptance. So 5 millimeter tubing, which is a 3/16, 4.7 millimeters. Okay. The tolerance exceptions. If I have a 6 millimeter tubing, which is a 1/4, I'm going to have a 6.35 millimeter is the tolerance. So the actual range is between a 4.7 to a 5.2. That would be the 5 millimeter. If I have a 6 millimeter tubing, I go between 5.9 and 6.4 millimeters. Okay. So we're going to take a break right here very quickly. I'm going to see if anybody has any questions. Do I have anybody? Okay. Doesn't look like we have any questions. The one thing I need to tell you is that down here on the bottom on the right side, it says all, and then it says post a comment. If you have a comment, make sure that you type that in and then hit the button on the right side, the arrow, and that will display it so that I can see it. All right. Well, doesn't look like we have any questions. Excuse me. So we're going to go now and we're going to learn how to assemble this press. Okay. So the assembly process for my capillary tube. Okay. Capillary tube cutters, I'm going to need a set. Cut the capillary tube at an angle to prevent collapsing the tube or changing the flow rate. I've got to be very careful of that. Okay. Whenever I was starting out in this business, we've always had one of these capillary tube cutters. The guy that trained me, I actually used a mill bastard file, and that's how I was taught to cut the capillary tube. But the one thing you need to make sure is that I have cleaned this capillary tube before I go to make any cuts. With a capillary tube, you have to be very careful because at some point I've got to clean this. And guess what? This goes right from the capillary tube and fits right into the end of the filter dryer. And if I get shavings in that, I can change the flow rate, or I may end up with a restriction. So I always tell everybody, please clean that capillary tube before you cut it. And I'd tell you the same thing with any fitting. Clean it before you make the cut. Okay. So here's the LSRZ tubing cutters. Okay. If I was doing appliance work, I would own a set of these. I love these. Okay. I can cut either aluminum, copper, or steel with it. Okay. I can have my diameter range is 4 to 12.7 millimeters. Okay. It only takes 120 degree rotation so that I can make the cut. So it helps me. There's nothing worse. I used to carry a little small tubing cutter about this size. Well, the only problem is some of the places I've had to get into, it was very difficult to get that tubing cutter all the way around. Some of the times you actually had to reach out and bend a little bit of the tubing, and I hate doing that. Okay. These only require 120 degree rotation, and that will cut everything smoothly. Okay. It minimizes the loss of the assembly length of the tube. That way I can separate it. Because that's one of the other things that you used to have to do. If I could not get my tubing cutter cut around it all the way, if I couldn't get it to move, that tubing length to move, I had to cut it off so that I could get my tubing cutter around it. Okay. So once again, this is the assembly process. This is what I call the double wrap method. That's the one in the picture. The reason that I like this one is because I had less problems with getting impurities into this unit. Like I said, I always clean mine before I ever make this cut. If you don't like this double loop method, you can always go to the single method, and that's right there under the picture. That's the drawing that they have. Okay, so I have to clean the tubing ends and a rotational motion to ensure that they are clean and free from paint or other surface impurities. Even your hands, okay, the oil on my hands will cause an issue. That's the reason that it's best to wear a pair of nitrite gloves. I am allergic to latex, so I have to use nitrate. Okay. I'm going to apply my Lock Prep 65G to my tubing ends. You see right there. How many drops is that? That's 1.5. Okay. After I do that, I'm going to insert them fully into the unit. Okay. Well, it's showing right here. I've got them totally. I've got the two pieces held, and I'm going to rotate 360 degrees. Like I said, I do 720. I just like rotating it twice to make sure that I have it evenly distributed. Okay. So once I get this done and I've made this connection and I've sealed it, I will need to let it rest. It's got to rest at least 10 minutes. If it's 70 degrees in the house, it's 10 minutes. If it's 40 degrees in the house, it's about 35 minutes. Okay. So I'm going to use this H mark tool. You can see it right here on the right. Okay. I would love to have a Lock Press Mini. Those are a little bit more expensive. If I was doing this full time again, I would guarantee you that I had one of these Lock Press Minis. If I'd use this Lock Press Mini, I can save myself so much time. It takes me a couple of minutes to make sure that I have my my HMRK. Okay, if I have my H mark tool, I've got to hold that fitting. I've got it laid into my. I can't even get here to that here. I lay it right here in my arm. I crank this side over here of this H mark, and I move it slowly in. I usually do about 4 clicks at a time, and that's how I start. Move it slowly. Move it slowly. And then once I get it compressed, that's all the way closed, I'm ready to go. I've got to make sure that I don't have any leaks though. So after you have closed the connection, you must wait for the cure time to be able to apply pressure. Okay, pulling a vacuum or twisting the tube. Okay, so frequently asked questions. Okay, is Lokring a new technology product? Well, it started in the 1960s. Okay, that's when it started. Okay. In about 70, so right in there, the late 70s, they had patented, they had perfected it, and thus patented the application. Okay. And the Lokring was integrated into the Hackforth group. Okay, that was in 1979. Starting in 2000s, due to the extensive use of isobutane, Lokring quickly dominated the OEM and service markets. In 2010, the complete range of connections for HVAC applications were launched. There are now 2 billion Lokring connections that have been installed in HVAC, refrigerators, and automobile applications. Okay. So once again, whenever we are talking about Lokring, I can go in our refrigeration. I can go between 1.6 millimeter and 10.5 millimeter. If I go to 10.5 millimeter, I am going to have to change my jaws. Okay. So, how much faster is Lokring tubing joining compared to brazing? So, it's hard for you to say, oh, I get a 60% reduction in time. It depends on the technician. It depends on how well they're versed with Lokring. But I will tell you that even without being super familiar, if I have my certificate and this is the second time I've ever been out, I still should be faster than going and using a brazing. It's a funny thing because I had technicians that I went and taught a school. The service center wanted to be trained on how to use a torch. Well, I've always used an oxygen acetylene. I'm still pretty proficient with the oxygen acetylene. I have also used the acetylene torch. I've even, depending on what I've been working on, I've also used MAP gas. That's usually whenever I'm working on plumbing for a household unit. Okay, but I can use any refrigerant except for ammonia and CO2. But all the rest of them I can use it on. Okay. Can I use lot prep that just recently expired? Once again, the answer to that is no. If it is over the date, so if it's a June expiration on 2025 and it's now July, I need to throw that away and get me a new tube. Okay. How much lot prep should be used? You have got to know your tubing size. So you have to go back to the dosing guide, and that will tell me my measurements and how many drops that I have to put on properly for the tubing. So how quickly does lot press start to cure? Okay. It will begin curing after about 20 seconds. That's the reason that I have to make my spins and start closing that gap. Okay. How long do okay, I'm going to go back right here. How long do I have to wait? That's the next question. It depends on the temperature in the house. So I have got to know what temperature I am out in the house. I'm not the normal person. I like my house cold. So in the wintertime, my house hangs around 66 to 68. never above 68. So I would have to go and I would have to look at my scale, and I would find out that at that 68 degrees, I'm right at about probably, I would probably save it for about 13 minutes, and that will cure me up. Okay. What type of tooling is required to install the Lokring connectors? Okay, we have the H mark tool. That is the ratcheting tool. And then we have the lock press mini. That uses a battery, and all I got to do is mash a button and it will do it for me. Okay. So the H mark is specifically developed for the Lokring system from 1.6 to 10.5 millimeters. It's a patented lever mechanism for the assembly with a minimum effort. The assembly jaws are easy to change in for different tube size diameters. Once again, if I'm anything below a 3/8, I don't have to change the jaws. Okay. Both handles are adjustable for use in hard to reach or restricted areas. It's German technology. The part number for that is an L13003829. Okay. Now my lock press my lock press mini. This is special hydraulic valve for quick and safe assembly of the Lokring connectors. It'll work between, just like the other one, 1.6 to 10.5 millimeters. It's a lightweight for single hand operation. It's delivered in a robust plastic case that actually has changed. They moved it from a robust plastic case to a flexible case. It was a little bit more difficult to get it in. So they use a little kind of it's almost a mesh case, and then this German technology. The part number for the lock press mini is L14004399. Okay, my lock press mini right there, $1,438. I don't use it enough to for me to even think about it. The H mark is $396. The H mark itself comes with 2 jaws, so it's really about $450 by the time you get taxes and everything else in it. Okay, so for that tubing cutter that I had talked about, that is $130 for that tubing cutter. Once again, it's well worth the money. If I'm out doing this and I'm having to cut tubing, I'm going to make sure that I have that's well worth $130. The only problem that I will ever have is if I let somebody borrow it and they try to put too much pressure on it, it will actually crack the wheels, and I got to replace the wheels. The wheels are replaceable, so I can just replace those wheels. Okay. Now, once again, this cutter is to cut capillary tubes. That's all it's for. Okay. That is $17. Those are the part numbers for each of these. If I'm going to pause right here for just a second, let you write those down. Once you write those down, we're going to go ahead. We're almost done. Okay. So we never mentioned the bag. I am going to own this bag at $67. you know what, I do not want to have to vent this outside. There's too many other issues that can happen. I'm just going to vent this into a bag. I can now take this bag outside whenever I get done. It's not required that I recover this. So I can take this outside, loosen my valve, and just roll it down tight, and I'm good. Tighten my valve back up, put the cap on. I'm ready to go to the next operation. Do not hang on to this and let it ride around in your truck. It will expand at 130 degrees or 165 degrees in your truck. The last thing you want is for it to go boom, because now I have butane floating around, and me turning the air conditioner on can send me into the outside. Okay, my charge kit. That charge kit is $462. Best value on the market. Okay, the starter kit itself, they didn't put a price down on it. It's around, don't quote me, but the starter kit itself is around $1,400. And that gets you your fittings, all the fittings that you need. It also comes with some sandpaper, both sets of jaws, comes with a bottle of lock prep, and it comes with a couple of filters that are specially designed. If something happens, because I happen to have one, okay, if I have this filter, all right, and I need to seal it off, I can do one of two things. I can either take and put my lock prep inside here, and once that happens, you won't be able to do it. Me, what I do is I always take around this threads right here. I put it in here on the inside, around the outside, and then I take and I screw this down. Okay. So now if I need to, I can take and hold this with my I think it's a 3/8 wrench, and I can take a pair of pliers and unscrew this, and I've still got no leaks that I'm going to have. Okay. All right. So what assembly draws are required for double O connectors? We've already talked about this. The article, the L2000200, that's the MB8. We have an MB. Excuse me. That is an MB8. That's between 1/16 and 5/16. An MB10 is the 3/8 tubing. Okay. And then the last one is an MB12, and that's the 1/2 inch. So I can get up to a 1/2 inch. It go anywhere between a 1/16 of an inch all the way up to a 1/2 inch tubing. Okay. What warranty associates with Lokring connectors? AVC warrants its products against defects in workmanship and material for a period of 1 year from the date of delivery. That the complete terms of warranty, you can find that in their terms and condition on their website, which is www.lokring.com. Okay. Does the installer need to be certified to use the Lokring connector? You do not have to be certified, but it's highly recommended. I would tell you, I don't want a technician going out there guessing at this, because I'm going to have more problems than it's worth. So get them trained. You saw that the two that were put on by Hanis, that was the old teacher from Lokring, and Jesse now works for Hanis. They do not charge for that. So if I'm in Las Vegas, I'm going to that class. if I'm anywhere around that area, because it does not cost me anything. Okay. What happens if Lokring enters the system? When the Lokring connection is made in accordance to the Lokring assembly instructions, liquid lock prep will never come in contact with the system oil or the refrigerant. So even in the case of too much lock prep being applied to the outer diameter of the tube, the clearance tolerances of the connector remove the excess lock prep when the connector is placed over the tube. Okay. So what is the tightness of the lock prep? This right here is unbelievable. Okay. This is basically it's basically my leak rate is the equivalent of 0.0000168 grams. Okay. So it's about 260 times better than the requirement of IS 14903. Okay. What type of tubing am I going to use? Like I said, copper, aluminum, and steel. Works for all of them. I just have to know where I'm going to put it. Okay. If I'm going to go copper to aluminum, once again, I'm using the aluminum. If I go aluminum to aluminum, I'm going to use the aluminum connector. If I go aluminum to steel, also I'm going to use that aluminum connector. Otherwise, I'm going to use the brass connector. Okay. So added product value right here. Basically, every manufacturer has signed up, and that's what they recommend. Okay. If you have any questions, scan this QR code. It will take you to the Lokring system itself. The Lokring, that will take you to the Lokring website, and then I can scroll through that and find anything that I need from Lokring. Once again, there's the disclaimer. Any liability for the information given with this presentation will be herewith disclaimed. It's just their typical disclosure. Okay, this winds up our class today.